A woman tells a story about a Christmas pageant where at the end of it, the characters were all exiting the stage, one by one, the shepherds and the angels, and finally St. Joseph and the Blessed Mother was following behind Joseph, when suddenly she stopped like she forgot something. And she went back over to the manger and she picked up the baby Jesus by the foot and dragged him off the stage. She said she never forgot that scene. She said in her life it reminded her that sometimes with all of the hustle, bustle, and activities of Christmas, we can forget about the Christ child. The church celebrates Christmas for a few weeks. The world out there, the secular world, ends Christmas after December 25th, pretty much. There's probably Valentine's stuff in the stores already. But the church today begins the Christmas season with Christmas Eve Mass, and then today the Feast of the Holy Family. Next Sunday, or this coming week on January the 1st, we have the Feast of the Solemnity of Mary, the Mother of God. It's, by the way, a holy day of obligation on Friday. And then Sunday, we have the Feast of the Epiphany, where the Magi come to see Christ. And finally, the final week after that, we have the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord, which officially ends the Christmas season. So the church offers all these days to reflect on who this Christ child is and how important he is for us. The Feast of the Holy Family. We have the Holy Family enshrined in our church. They are a model for us. The beautiful reading from Sirach is a sermon in itself. You know, take care of your father when he is old. A person who obeys their father brings joy to their mother. Revere your mother. It is a great treasure for you. Honor your father and your mother. It's put so beautifully in the book of Sirach. And in the second reading from St. Paul, put on kindness, humility, patience, forgiveness, all those virtues in your family life. We're called, all of us called to be a holy family. A holy family is one who has a place for God, central in their family life. And a holy family is one who respects and loves one another. It's with the virtues that we see in Mary and Joseph. There was a medical research scientist who had discovered some great achievements in medicine. And he was asked what inspired him to get into that field. And he said it went all the way back to when he was a little boy. And he said one day he went to the refrigerator to get a glass of milk. And he picked up the large gallon plastic jug of milk, and it slipped out of his hands and it spilled all over the floor. Well, then his mother enters the scene, and she just looks at it and says, "Robert, this is the most colossal mess I've ever seen in the kitchen." And she says, "Well, since the milk's already all over the floor, do you want to play in it for a little while?" So he said, "I splashed around in the milk for a little while." And then he said, "My mother came and said, now it's time to clean up this mess. So do you want a mop, or do you want a towel, or do you want a sponge?" He said, "Well, I'll take the sponge." And the two of them cleaned up all the milk. When they were finished cleaning it up, the mother said, "Now, Robert, let's go out into the backyard and take that plastic jug with you. And we're going to fill it up with water so you can practice how to handle it. You can see how to pick it up, how to take the top off and everything without dropping it. And hopefully that'll teach you the next time how to get the glass of milk and you won't have an accident." He said he remembered that all of his life, what his mother told him. She said to him, "It was like an experiment," she said. "You know, you tried something and it failed. That's a lesson in life. Sometimes we will fail. Sometimes we'll make mistakes. But out of that, you can learn something from your mistakes." He said, "I learned something about how to handle that jug of milk." And he said, "Today in my research," he said, "I often make mistakes. And sometimes out of those mistakes, I learn great things." It's a lesson, how the mother handled it. In the gospel today, Mary and Joseph were frantic. You parents would understand more than anyone. Your child's been missing for 3 days. They were panicking. And so Mary, you can see it in her voice in the reading, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And she doesn't holler at him. She doesn't yell at him. She just expresses to him her concern. And Jesus, it says, and his response wasn't a smart alecky response. "Didn't you know that I have to be in my Father's house?" It was the beginning of him revealing himself to them. But they didn't understand it, so they kept these things closely in their hearts and meditated upon them. But notice that Jesus, and people say, well, how could they have, lost him? Well, in those days, when they made this, it was about a 70-mile trip from Nazareth to Jerusalem. And the neighbors and the relatives all got into a caravan, it says in the gospel. And they traveled together for safety from wild animals and from robbers. But the parents, everybody took care of everybody's family. Kind of like when I was growing up, we didn't lock our doors out on Puritas Avenue. Everybody took care of each other's kids in the neighborhood. We couldn't get away with anything because our neighbors would tell our parents what we did. And it was kind of like that they traveled together. And so it was likely that Jesus would have been with Joseph and the men, and Mary wouldn't have worried about him. But somehow they connected and realized he wasn't with them. And then they panicked. Of course, they went back, and we know the story, how it ends up. But notice it says that Jesus went back to Nazareth and was obedient to them. To be obedient to somebody isn't just do this and don't do that. Being obedient means to listen intently. To listen intently. If we want to be obedient to God, we have to listen intently to what God tells us. If children, you want to be obedient to your parents, listen intently to what they say. Because God gave them to you. They have wisdom, they have understanding, they love and care for you. And so if we listen intently, then we follow what they say because we love them and we know that they love us. That's the way obedience should work within families and the way it should work with God. And St. Paul reminds husbands and wives, love each other. Love each other. You can tell your children all kinds of ways to act and live, but they will learn most by what they see and hear from you. Husbands and wives, love each other. That's a simple command. And children, obey your parents. Fathers, don't agitate your children. Explain things to them. These readings are sermons in themselves. And so today, as we celebrate the Feast of the Holy Family, we're so grateful that God has given us his son, Jesus. And in another story, another scene from a pageant took place in a prison. A group of prisoners wanted to do a pageant for Christmas Eve. And so they had trouble getting props. And they got a box to use as the manger, and they took apart a mop so that one of them could put the mop on his head to look like the Blessed Mother. And their problem was they didn't have a baby doll or anything. So one of them said, well, just get a blanket and wrap it up tight and we'll pretend there's a baby in there. And another guy said, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. So they went to their chaplain and said, we need a baby for the pageant. The chaplain said, don't worry, I'll provide something for you. So when the night came, he came with this all wrapped up in a blanket. And when they opened it up, there was a crucifix in it. What a lesson. There was a crucifix. This baby Jesus was born to die on the cross. This baby Jesus was born to give his life for us. What a lesson to learn. And so we thank God today. In the joy of this scene, we know that he came to save us, to overcome sin and overcome death so that we might have eternal life. So in these days, when we reflect on who this child is, we thank the Lord for allowing him to be so close to us, personally, individually, and certainly as a community. Today we ask the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, to bless all of our families today and throughout the rest of this Christmas season.